How does web accessibility impact SEO? Hello and welcome to the April 2024 edition of the Majestic SEO Panel, where we'll be covering how web accessibility impacts SEO and what to do about it. I'm your host, David Bain, and joining me today are four wonderful SEO and accessibility experts. So let's see who they are. Let's get them to introduce themselves, starting off with Billie.
Hi everyone, I'm Billie Geena. I'm an SEO consultant and I've kind of fallen deep into the rabbit hole of web accessibility. So I'm happy to be here and to share and learn from everyone.
Lovely, thanks for joining us, Billie. And also with us today is Robert. Sorry, Damien. Why have I got your surname
That's why I didn't put my surname in.
Damien. Monsieur Robert.
Hi, I'm Damien. I work in Convertech, which is a medtech company in the UK, part of the FTSE 100. And I was until last year the SEO lead there, but now I'm the SEO and web accessibility lead by full choice. And I'll be happy to tell you a bit more about that later.
Wonderful, and a splendid job title for this particular discussion. So look forward to hearing what you've got to share with us. Also with us today is Heike.
Hello, my name is Heike. I own the Good SEO company, and also I am an advocate for neurodiversity in the community. So web accessibility is something high on my priority always.
Superb, thank you, Heike. And another panelist today is Heba.
SEO consultant. I've been working in SEO for 10 years, but lately I've been interested in accessibility as I have a visually impaired son. And this is something I love to discuss with you guys, how we can make the web more accessible for everyone.
Great. For this particular discussion. So the first question that I'd like to share with the panel is, what is web accessibility? And I thought we'd go back to Damien, actually, because Damien, you've got accessibility in your job title. So I'm sure you've got a definition ready to go.
Well, I don't have a definition ready to go. I've got like a very shortcut definition that I love to use actually to put education in place in-house. It's like web accessibility is nothing more than web for all. And that should be understood like that, and not complicated by other definitions. Sometimes it's more interesting to understand from that point of view, or we can use the word universal web, let's say. And this is it. This is how do you want your website to be seen by all? So then follow the path of web accessibility. That's what I would say.
Web for all. Absolutely love it. Great definition there. Joining us in the chat today is Monsi. Monsi's saying, hello, all, such a great topic. We should be shouting about more. Thanks for joining us more. And one of our panelists, Billie, is shouting hi, Monsi, in the chat as well. Well, I hope you're able to share in the discussion here, Billie, as well as sharing in the chat. I'm sure you can multitask. Billie, what are your thoughts on the definition of web accessibility?
So for me, it's all about creating an equitable experience across the web. So we're not excluding any type of user due to ability to give attention, ability to navigate a site, disability, that we create a strong user experience for everyone. And as a result, it benefits other marketing activities, it benefits businesses, it benefits people. It's just such a no-brainer activity. I don't know why it's not more talked about.
Absolutely, and wonderful thoughts and a great little definition there as well. Heike, what are your thoughts on this?
I can add to what they said before also, because I think in the point it is making sure that websites are accessible for everybody, that everybody can use them. And also, let's say what Billie said, we need to make sure we should talk more about it, because again, I don't understand also why we don't talk so much about it, and also why businesses sometimes don't make this a priority, because we have such a big market share in the world that people that need inclusive websites, accessible websites are out there. So I can only say to the authors, can't add so much more to it because they said it perfectly.
Absolutely. And it's not just doing the right thing, it's doing the right thing for your business financially as well. As you say, Heike, there are so many people out there that would really appreciate this and engage a lot more with what you do as a business, your website, as a result of it being easier for them to interact with. Heba, what are your thoughts?
I love all what they said. Actually, they said everything, but I want to add that it's a human right to have accessibility in everything in life. So a web is something that we should include, and every business owner should include this. It's human right for someone to be able to reach this business or to reach this product, to buy online like everybody, to search for a research online like everybody. Because I once had a chat with someone and he said that everything he gets from Wikipedia only because this is the only accessible thing that he can use. And this is something I found it very awkward, because there are a lot of people out there that share knowledge that can benefit someone like this. So it's a human right that we should consider just it.
Now, a lot of laws, a lot of what we have to do as business owners, as website operators, comes from the EU, the European Union, and the European Accessibility Act enforcing that sites are accessible. Accessible requirements will happen from June 2025. Damien, what's this about? What does that actually mean in practice? Sorry, Damien, I think you're muted there.
Of course, someone needed to do it at least once. Yeah, it's very interesting. The European Accessibility Act really enforcing in June 2025, as you say, David, because it's a new law. It doesn't mean that it's a first law in the EU, but the previous law were more targeting public sector. While the EAA is targeting private and public sector and in a wider range of requirements. So actually accessibility is not only asked for built environment, but also for lots of digital access. And also because I know that sometimes when people think EU, especially in the UK nowadays, they don't think for themselves, but we are talking about a law that is concerning any business doing some business with any countries of the EU. So it's exactly the same kind of setting than GDPR, if you remember it. I know that it's been a little bit hated by people. Also, it looks like it in terms of like the reach of for the businesses to actually comply to law is going to be completely different this time, because we're talking really much about people and probably opening the eyes of lots of people. And yeah, the difference is really because it concerns public sector and private sector. So far, only the US had really like a strict law and very demanding for the private sector, but maybe Israel too, if I recall, but not many countries. For now, the laws were really targeting public sector because to lots of understanding or like probably misconception, the first need of people living with disability is public websites, you know? So that might be true, but it's so short-sighted. And I'm very excited personally about this new law in 2025, because I think that it's going to open the eyes and mind of lots of people, hopefully.
Billie, I saw you nodding your head away there. Would you like to add anything to that?
One of the big things that I've been trying to explain with the European Accessibility Act is this isn't just an act that's affecting websites. It's affecting a lot of things in the EU, just what you'll encounter day to day. So public transport, they're required to make changes, not just on their website, but in the actual acts of being able to get from A to B, adding things like headphone jacks to ATMs. It's going to be changing a lot of things. So it's really important to the that any sector really that's required to undergo changes also reflects that online. And I think it's going to be a really big communication piece across the whole of the internet, really, like not just doing the changes, but also saying you're doing the changes so you can actually help and explain to your disabled users. It doesn't necessarily have to be disabled users either, just to anyone that might need additional support and understanding. It's going to be such a big, interesting piece. I'm really excited to see this all pan out and see how it like spreads, because whilst we might not have to make some of the same changes here in the UK because we left the EU, I'm sure as someone that travels and is a very anxious traveller, that there's going to be a demand for changes that we see out there in the EU for here in the UK. I'm so excited to see just how all of this pans out.
Absolutely, and especially as Damien was saying, it's not just about you as a business that happens to be based in the UK. If that's where you are, it's where your customers are based. And if you're doing business with people who are in the EU, then you have to be aware of what this means to you as a business. Heba, you're the one that was nodding away then. What would you like to add?
Yes, because I feel like when this is something that got imposed in the EU, it's going to spread worldwide. As an international SEO, that happens a lot because I can be a business owner from whatever, Dubai, and he's targeting people from UK and people from Europe and people from US. So if he didn't oppose the accessibility to his website and his products or whatever he's offering, he's gonna lose a lot of potential clients or potential user for their website. So yes, I didn't know about this act before this event, and I shared it with everybody I know because it's something that I would love to see everywhere. Yes, I would love to get Google to impose accessibility as a ranking factor so that people start to get their eyes open for this and start doing something.
Heike, is this something that you've looked at?
Oh yeah, for sure. It is also from my personal point of view, is, let's say, because I'm neurodivergent myself, I have ADHD, autism, and dyslexia. For me, the accessibility for websites is essential because it's how to process information is so important. The only thing what I would like to say is, like, I find it always a shame that it needs to be forced by a law that businesses are starting to listen. And I see that in many other things. It's just a small rant that I want to do. I'm not going to go down further in it because else we will be talking about this for hours. But it's going to be quite a big difference. It's the same like the Disability Act in the United States, the European Act. Yes, I know there will be companies and organizations in the UK saying it's like, oh, we don't do anything with the EU. But in fact, you will probably will. And we will be more than likely taking over this law within the next coming 5 years from the EU to be more aligned with the EU. Because we still trade with the EU and they would like that we follow also their examples. We maybe left the EU, but we still quite aligned with it.
Billy's saying in the chat, wouldn't it be ideal if accessibility best practices were a clear ranking factor rather than just a supporting act? I guess
I've got
that
a
would
little
make
story about that if you want, David.
Go for it, Damien, yeah.
Google and because I was a speaker at the International Research Summit last year, and Gary Elias was there actually, and for the keynote at the end of the conference, and it was question and answer. It had a question about accessibility. Is it a ranking factor? Can you say it now? Can you stop making it a secret? It must be. And Gary said, actually, I cannot say that. I cannot say it's a ranking factor, but I can say that it's a factor of being a decent human being. And I thought that was quite a good flip to the question, to actually think, like, don't do accessibility to have better ranking. Of course, it could actually maybe encourage more businesses to do it. And I share that with you, Billie. I would love that to happen one day, but maybe it will never happen, because then if the narrative is like, just be a decent human being, then it would probably remain the narrative. And this month, and I think it was only last month, sorry, in March, a few days ago, Google Ireland opens a new accessibility discovery center, which is also very interesting, coming from Google, and doing lots of sort of things to actually improve the accessibility within Google. But of course, it will probably impact the search engine algorithm. Fingers crossed. But I think it's probably already the case anyway.
We've got Monty interacting in the chat there, saying people from other countries may need to interact with UK-based websites and other assets. They may be used to certain accessibility or UX that they can't find, and that might cause friction. Absolutely. You want a frictionless experience and the same brand experience internationally. Great having the interaction here on YouTube. Obviously, we're broadcasting live here. We've got loads of people watching on X Live, or if you want to call it Twitter, let's call it Twitter. But if you're watching there, hi. Good to have you as well. And of course, we're a podcast, so if you want to listen to the whole show or pop off in a bit, make sure you're subscribed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you actually get your podcasts from. But let's talk a little bit about practically what a business has to do in order to comply with any future legislation, and just make sure that they're doing the right thing for the user from an ethical perspective, but also a commercial perspective as well. Damien, what are a few things that a business should be doing now to A, comply with the legislation, and B, just ensure that their accessibility is top notch?
I think for me it's starting with a conversation, a new dialogue maybe with the dev team and senior staff. Everything starts with education, and I saw that my side really, especially working in-house lately, without a proper conversation, without talking about web for all or new compliance needs. Sometimes talk to other people. We can use different talks for different people to try to either touch their heart or touch their wallets, I would say, or different concerns they could have first. Web accessibility can really encompass it all. So for me, it's starting with a very good conversation about the story, why we need to get there, and when. And from that point, then the resources come along. I think a champion for web accessibility in-house is needed, and in agency. That can be one role, or like me now, just half of my role beside SEO is really to champion web accessibility in-house. So I would start with that, really with education. This is not the only element, of course, but this is where I started, and a good web accessibility champion couldn't really unlock everything, budget, resources, everything.
So as half of you is a web accessibility champion, what do you do initially in order to encourage more people to think about web accessibility, get more prominence to the area, get devs and perhaps other stakeholders involved in understanding how essential this is?
Well, I say the story every time, so I give the context. Rather than just giving a list of requirements, which could be possible too, and could probably work with small teams, but in a big company, I always want people to be motivated for the good reason. If they work for web accessibility, they're going to work for something more beautiful than just like actually writing lines of codes, and I think that's important to get the motivation. So I say that story. I remind them about the percentage of people living with a severe disability in the world. I remind them about all the different laws. I remind them about like the fact that it's been 25 years that we're talking about accessibility, and the web is still not accessible, and this is not acceptable anymore. And yeah, I go through all of this story, and after that, maybe I give some example roles, and really make the separation between the technical aspect of accessibility that we need to work on and the content aspects. So everything technical for the devs, everything around coding, which will probably talk a lot to technical SEO people, and also everything around the content, how to make media assets more accessible, videos, images, and so forth. So that's how I tell the story, and I tell it again and again, just to give context and gain motivation or buy-in from other people.
Lovely. Okay, I mean, I certainly would like to hear specific examples from our panelists on examples on in terms of what can be done to improve web accessibility and how tangibly that can ideally impact the bottom line, as well as make users more satisfied with the brand. Heike, in relation to what Damien was saying there, Damien was talking about ensuring that devs really have that passion project in terms of understanding the value that accessibility can bring. Is that the kind of conversation that you have with devs?
Oh yeah, for sure. It is a conversation you need to have. And I just want to also say, I fully agree with Damien. You need to communicate with the community also. It's like, that's so essential, getting the feedback from that. It's, for example, also a little bit is, let's say, the communication is also the changes is, let's say, something simply with dyslexia, that you can make sure that the screen can go from a background, sorry, let me rephrase that. A black background with white lettering and changing it around to make it more readable and like that. But also, I think also in the conversation with your partners, like developers, other organizations you work with, is also explaining why you do it. Getting them to understand what is the reasons. Is, let's say, because I know quite a bit about neurodiversity, I tell them it's about 25% of the UK population is more than likely being neurodivergent. So if you talk with all your stakeholders on this and sharing it, it's so essential. And other things also, let's say with your content writers, your copywriters, talking about making text more clearer, more better to process. And there's a ton of other things to explain. There's a whole list what can be done, and it is quite important.
So, I mean, in general, how does neurodivergency affect the way that you consume websites, and you've listed some styling enhancements that can be made. You're changing to black and white and vice versa. Are you talking about increasing font size? Are you talking about writing slightly differently as well?
Yeah, you can have a look at the different kind of font. Make sure it is a dyslexia or neurodivergent friendly font, so it's easy to write. So sometimes I go to clients and they come with these interesting fonts, let's say it like that. I say, like, it is not really readable. It's the same, like, bit larger fonts. It can be that you can have that it is the screen talks to you. Sorry, I forgot the word about that, but the sum of the things is the same thing, but also the user experience is so important. I need to have clear steps. I can write a whole in-depth report, but I can get easily confused if it's not a clear process on a website. I need to have all the information there and other bits. So the same as, let's say, yeah, I need support in some things and support in not in everything. But those are some of the things, but there is, I think, a million other things. And this is why it is important to discuss it with the community, because everybody has different needs, different ways to approach it, different things to look at it. And if we just follow, it's like what I always say to people, it's like somebody says, like, oh, I know one person with ADHD. I say, you know, one person, there's another 50,000 with different needs. And that's why it is so important that we have this conversation and make the websites, the web, as accessible for everyone as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. It shows you that it's important to have these conversations, because you were saying that if you're neurodivergent, if you've got ADHD, then there are certain fonts that are easier for you to consume. And I didn't even think that was an issue. But it's so important not to have any preconceptions. You just have open conversations with people who are consuming what you're doing, and you try and ensure that what you're delivering is satisfying them as best as possible. Apparently, reading an article here, sans fonts are more ADHD friendly, but perhaps that's not across the board. But it's quite incredible, elements like that you don't necessarily think of beforehand. So you really need to have those conversations as you were talking about. Heba, what kind of like conversations are you having, or what elements are you finding that you're introducing into sites that you didn't necessarily consider beforehand?
You mean how to convince people to reach out to accessibility in their website?
Yeah, I mean, are you? What kind of conversations have you had about improving a website's accessibility?
Yes.
And which
So
specific
when I talk
elements
about this, like they
have you?
said, yeah, like they said, it's communication, and business owners always speak with numbers and statistics. So this is something I always go through before I get to meet a client and talk about a website and how to improve their accessibility and their SEO at the same time. So we need to talk numbers. How many are you losing if you're not doing this? How many users you're using? How many dollars you're losing actually? And then because I know it's something that is essential, and it's like being a good human and everything, but they don't talk this language anymore. They talk dollars, they talk numbers, and they talk business. So this is how we get to the conversation of starting this. The second thing is that it would not cost them anything just to add some aspect in their website, some elements, and it's going to be helpful for other users and for search engine as well, because most of the elements that we're talking about to make a website accessible, especially for visually impaired and for screen readers, it's actually equal to being accessible for search engine. So when you're adding like anchor text for a link to describe what link is this, you're talking to Google or search engine, and you're talking to the screen reader and the visually impaired people and the people with disability. We're gonna know what they are doing in the website. And where you're adding alt text or alt tag, you're describing an image for the search engine and for the user as well. So you're having the best of both worlds. You're doing what you're doing for ranking good and getting new clients and expanding your website and business for other people with disabilities. And this is something huge. For me, it's huge. For the business owner, it's money,
Well, I mean,
So
they want to be a
it's
good
always
human as
some
well,
that
but it's
I
easier for them to
start
be
with.
a good human if it's profitable for them to be a good
Yes,
human.
exactly. Yes, exactly. And actually, I start with the easy stuff. I don't like throw all the balls in the ground. No, we just start with the easy stuff, and then we head to a developer if they are redesigning a website. That's a good point. So let's start here. So if you're redesign, you need to take care of the colors, contrast, take care of the font, like Heike said, and I'm gonna like I always give resources for developer for that, so they don't feel like it's a heavy load for them. So designers and developers should be our friends in this, because if they are not cooperating and we're not cooperating with them, we're not gonna get anywhere. So we start with this when they are redesigning, and coding actually is the worst part, because sometimes developers are like, I'm not gonna put an extra code for the search engine to read the elements, or for the keyword users. This is something essential that we should put, because there are many keyboard users. About 2.2 billion of the people globally are visually impaired. So most of them, they don't use mouse. They use a keyboard shortcut, the tab, index tab. And if the website is not accessible for this, you're going to lose a lot of client if you're international brand. So
Billie,
that's how we start. Yeah.
Billie, what is an accessibility statement? Why is it important, and how do you write one?
So an accessibility statement is kind of your written commitment to bettering your website or business's accessibility practices. Whether they're important or not, I don't think I can give a proper answer, because they are valuable, they are encouraged, and they are often used as a get out of trouble card for many businesses, where they're being caught out. They could be potentially in a situation where there could be a legal case for them not being an accessible site. So what they'll do is say, oh, I wasn't aware, we'll look into this. They'll put together an accessibility statement identifying that there's a problem and what they're going to do about it. Unfortunately, I've seen a few businesses in this situation and think, you know what, there's an accessibility statement here. Users can see it if they want. We're addressing it, but there's no timeline on this. It's not a priority. Why should I spend money on this right now? So I'm a little bit jaded towards them. I don't know if other people have different experiences and love them or what.
Heike, do you have an experience with this?
I know, Billy, you said this also yesterday on the email, and I directly came back, I see it often. A lot of businesses, and I've met also some of them, they use it as a get out of jail card, but don't take it too serious, because a lot of people think, oh, people with disabilities is only a couple of people. It's not in a rush. But again, it's like what we all been saying here. Even if we take 10% of the world population has a disability one way or another, visually impaired, dyslexia, etc., it's a big group. But businesses don't see that it is necessary to do this. And I try to avoid these organizations, businesses for sure, that are not disability friendly. And I use disability because it's in more things. Is, let's say, and the thing is like the changes are not that big. Sometimes they think it is going to cost them millions. Okay, it depends on the size of the business, but it's mostly just the communication, how you communicate on your website, how you show things. Old names on your pictures is such a big difference already for visually impaired people, and even people with hearing impairment. Making sure that it is readable. Don't use all caps, because that's also one of the things. It's like, and maybe that would be a tip for me, because if you use all caps on the website, some readers shout at you because they see it as shouting. So there's a lot of things you need to have a look at, and businesses really, they need to change their attitude. They really need to start taking this serious, because there are many out of us. Just as a statistic to use is, let's say in the UK, I know research is going on, and the most conservative number that I know is that 75% of people with ADHD don't know they have ADHD. So there's so many more out of there. And also what Heba said is like, there's so much potential that business owners leave outside. But it shouldn't be about the money. It should also be like what we said here about being a good person. But
it should be, but
obviously,
okay. the kind of laws coming in, the European Accessibility Act that we touched upon at the beginning, means that the EU are looking to ensure that people have an equal opportunity to purchase or have access to a digital product or service across the area. So, I mean, what does that mean if the EU feel that websites aren't complying with this? Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Billie?
So I've got a great example about this. I've got more than one example of this exact same thing happening. But I've worked with numerous business owners and clients who have said, why do I want a disabled person to buy my products? I've seen this most in the like DIY niche, selling electric drills, power tools, things like that. why should I sell to a disabled person? And disability is such a spectrum. So I could tell in that client's head, they are thinking of a person with very limited mobility, probably in a wheelchair, who's someone who cannot look after themselves. I could see that in the client's eyes, that that's what they're picturing. But it could be anything really. Like, a lot of disabled people can manage and live in society on their own, by themselves. They don't need to be infantilized as much as people do. And it's important that our services do not exclude anyone. Even if, say, this person was someone with limited mobility, they could still live on their own. They might not be able to use a power tool, but they can buy a power tool, and they might have a friend, a family member coming to build some cabinets for them. It could be anything. You do not know the circumstance of your customers. So to exclude them at any point in the journey, it's just pointless. It's ridiculous. It's a bad decision on all fronts. And sorry, I'm getting wound up and I'm about to start ranting there. So if anyone wants to butt in.
I mean, so I'm just researching in relation to fines. So I'm reading an article that says, as the EAA will only be enforceable in 2025, specific details about fines aren't available yet, but historical legislation such as GDPR demonstrate that fines for non-compliance can reach up to 20 million euro or 4% of the worldwide annual revenue of the prior fiscal year. So if a large organization doesn't treat this seriously, it could be quite costly financially.
I've made some research to David about the fine price, because this is helping my story usually. So we're talking about 100,000 euros for a typical fine in the EU. That's recommended, but of course we don't know how the EU countries are going to apply the EAA in June 2025. But I've read in lots of different articles and some official ones that it could be that price. A point of comparison that could be interesting in the US with the ADA and the fines that are going on for already a few years. They're starting at $45,000 US dollars, but they're cumulative for all actually the non-compliant elements you have of your website. So there is a massive example of Target, which is like an e-retail company in the US, and it's a rather old example. I think it's probably 10 years old example, but they had to pay $6 million of US dollars of fine for not having been accessible for people with visual impairment. So this is quite massive, and it was all about the lack of art attributes on the images, which is always what we're talking about when we put SEO, and web accessibility in the same bag. So these fines are not, they're not just like imaginary. They're concrete already in the US, and I will become concrete in the EU for any business doing business with the EU countries. And I think that's definitely an important element for us all to educate and raise awareness for people, as Heba said, who are more seeing the business than more interesting into the business than being a decent human being. But you can reach out to both of these people, because it will benefit them all.
So there's obviously the carrot and the stick. That's the stick, getting the big fine, but you obviously would prefer to eat a carrot. So Heba, is it possible, is it measurable that improving your web accessibility can actually benefit your SEO?
Heike, you wanted to say something, but I'm going to answer your question fast. Yes, it is. Actually, it is like the best of both worlds. You're doing both things, because a lot of the factors that are already a ranking factor in SEO is actually connected with having an accessible website. So if we start from here, if we start from these elements or these things, factors, and go from there, it's going to be like having a good content, a very easy to read content without any complex wording for someone like Heike said, because we don't want a content that's very hard for people to read, or complex words. When you're adding bullets and listing in the content, it actually you're targeting featured snippet. At the same time, it's very good for people with disability to have their information listed and easy to read and easy to get to. So you're having the best of both worlds here. If you're having a speedy website, same thing, because when I'm using a magnifier, sometimes the website freeze, but when the speed is good, it's actually going very good. So speedy websites is good for core vitals, and it's good for a search engine, and at the same time it's very good for people with disability and accessibility. So a lot of these factors, if we can go on forever for these, so it actually do affect SEO and do affect the ranking of the website. If you're having all these technical issues fixed and all these elements fixed, you're going to gain more users and get a good ranking factor and feature snippets.
Heike, you were looking to add something to the
Yeah.
previous point.
Yeah, I was just also to agree with Billy, is let's say stereotyping is so horrible around this. Let's say I get stereotyped also when I say I have autism. They say, how can you socialize and network? Because they think I just like to sit in my room all day and do train spotting. I always use that a bit as an example. I explained I can do a little bit more than that. But also what Heba was just saying is, let's say, I say simply, SEO is already there to make things more accessible, because in essence we are writing and creating something where people are looking for. So if we don't make it accessible, we don't doing our jobs right, because we are missing out what are people are looking for. So it is so essential that we just need to make sure that everything is accessible. Yes, I'm happy that there will be fines, because if there's no fines also behind the legislation, businesses won't take it serious. Because again, the same like what Billy said is, let's say, oh, a person that's in a wheelchair and can't use power tools, but that doesn't mean they don't want to buy it. A good friend of mine, I met him yesterday also, he's in a wheelchair. He's born without arms and legs, but he still can buy a power tool. So, yeah, I should be shocked sometimes if I hear these things, but I'm not, because I know it happens. And I think this is why we need to create more awareness. But I think also we need to educate our clients sometimes more. Is, let's say, what Billy also said, is, let's say, there is more than just the disabled person in the wheelchair. There is so many more. Is, let's say, I have good friends that are from the hearing community, from the blind community, etc. And if you hear the stories what they need to go through, is, let's say, that's why I am starting to focus also more. And the same like the sign itself, leaflets, and a simple thing, a bit offline, is like a business card. Make sure you have Braille on the back, so people with visual impairment can read it also. It's maybe 2% of the population that can read Braille, but still, it's one of the things.
Good thoughts. Let's finish off by asking each of our panelists to share one action that you would recommend the listener takes now to better prepare for the upcoming legislation, but just to deliver better accessibility in general to their website. And then I'll ask you to share your details so that the listener can get in touch with you. Let's go back to Damien to begin with. Damien, what's your number one action step that you'd like to leave the listener with?
So that's going to be a very easy one. I always say that we tend to forget that SEO is born from web accessibility and not the other way around. So check your title tags, your meta description, your headings. They're all were designed for web accessibility at the first place, not for SEO, not for Google, for accessibility, because the Google bot is actually deafblind. And when we are working well in terms of SEO, and we're really checking that we have a title for every page, meta description, a good heading structure. We're already working for web accessibility, and it should be reassuring for some SEOs here. But really, sometimes we have to switch our mindset and rethink everything that we are doing. And yes, the title tag, the first function of a title tag was to actually have it on the tab on a browser and know where we were, for people with visual impairment, know where they were with using a screen reader. So just don't change lots, but review all of that. This is good for web accessibility too.
Thank you, Damien. Where can people find you online?
On LinkedIn. So just Damien Robert SEO and you find me.
Lovely stuff. And Billie, what's your number one action that you'd like to recommend?
My number one action is to spend some time manually auditing sites on both the desktop and on your mobile. Download a screen reader, navigate the site, and go back to the home page and try and get to a random page just by using tabs. Experience the site that way. And then on mobile, try and understand how a mobile device could be used by someone with, say, limited mobility. So try using your knuckle to navigate from the home page to a random page. That'll give you a ton of ideas on just how to improve things. Rabbit holes to fall down, a lot of research, but that's always where I start. And then if you do want to find me anywhere online, I'm Billie Geena, or on LinkedIn, Billie Geena Hyde. That's all.
Thank you so much, Billie. Great to have you on. Heba, what's your number one action you'd like to share?
I love what Billie said. This is actually my number one, but I have a number two as well. As a business owner for myself, independent consultant, I do an audit for every website I take. And these audit, I use tools that shows how much accessibility this website is missing. Or Axe extension, dev extension on Google, to try and see your website if it's accessible or not. And there are many other tools that we can share later, like color contrast and font and etc. And you can always find me online and ask me any questions. My LinkedIn, Heba Saeed, and I have a website, Heba Saeed.
Thank you so much, Heba. Great to have you on as well. Heike, what's your number one action?
I need to agree with Heba and Billie also. I was also saying do audits because that's so important, having a look. But I think my second biggest tip is also reach out to the community that will use it. Get feedback with it. There are companies that can offer feedback sessions, share the information. I'm part of again, because I'm more focused on neurodiversity, I'm in a couple of groups in neurodiversity where you can just ask the questions, okay, get feedback, what can be done. But that's also part of the auditing, getting the feedback, making sure you're more accessible, and just making the world a much happier place and more accessible place. But we should.
Absolutely. And where can people find you, Heike?
Oh yeah, I forgot that. Let's say you can find me on LinkedIn. Look up my name, Heike Knip or Heike J. Knip. I'm the only guy around there because my name is a girl's name in Germany, so 95% is women.
Interesting fact of the day.
Yeah.
Thank you so much to our panel for that wonderful discussion. I've been your host, David Bain. You've been listening to the Majestic SEO Panel. If you want to join us, thank you. Yeah. If you want to join us live next time, sign up at majestic.com/webinars. And of course, check out our other series at SEOin2024.com. Bye-bye for now.